Good morning, Adriana.
Good morning, Yossi.
Thank you very much for joining us. From how far you came to the event?
I actually do live in Miami, and I was here this week, so this was a very easy commute.
That's great. And we have 20 minutes. They allow us to have another 5 minutes, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So first of all, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company.
Sure. So I was born in Venezuela. I've been in the United States for over 20 years and in Miami for 5. I moved to Miami when I was taking over as CEO of our family business. Our family business is almost 100 years old. And I like to say that we're a very old company that does a lot of new things. It's been really fun becoming CEO. There's no mandate that leadership had to become from the family. So it was sort of a new thing that we were trying out, and it's been a lot of fun.
And what the company is doing, for those who are not familiar, I think everybody here in the room must be familiar with the Cisneros group, but tell us.
You know, I don't know, maybe not. I think we're different from most family business groups in that we've been in a lot of businesses and in a lot of geographies. We have this thing where since the founding of our company, every 10 or 15 years, we press pause, we look around, and we decide if there's a new market we want to enter or a new field that we want to do a deep dive. So that means that we've been in a lot of things. There's decades that we've been focused in consumer goods in Latin America. There's decades that we think Latin America has gone to hell, and we go to China and we go to Europe and so forth. Right now, we're 90% focused in Latin America, and I was given a chance to reorganize our company and create the divisions that I would actually want to run for the next 20 years. Currently, our divisions are media, which in a way is our only legacy business. It's the only business we've always been in, and that's everything related to TV consumption across all platforms these days. We also started a digital business called Interactive, where we set out to build not only the largest ad network in all of Latin America, but also the smartest one. And that's what actually brought me to move to Miami, because we now have, for that business alone, 31 offices in 22 countries with 300 people, and they're all kind of south of Miami, a few in the States as well. And we have a real estate business. And obviously, media and digital are first cousins, and they're working on interesting things together, and real estate is separate.
Yeah, but mainly, will it be correct to say that you are recognized for the group is recognized for the media involvement?
I would say yes and no. I think on the media is a big word, and it's becoming broader and broader. I think our big media bets that kind of put us on the map was when we launched the DirecTV service in Latin America in the 90s. We were able to do it a couple years before DirecTV USA was able to launch. And this was a truly revolutionary idea at the time. We were the first ones building private satellites to launch into space for the region. And before DirecTV, when you would watch cable television, it was totally fragmentized, right? There were the legal cable companies, the illegal cable companies, where there were a lot of them. And this was the first opportunity where you could speak to a programmer about the potential of having everybody in Latin America have access to the same programming. So that was pretty cool. And then around the same time, we also launched AOL, which is what brings us together. And AOL is our favorite disaster to talk about. It was a really cool idea. At the time, no one knew that the model was flawed. But it was also a big bet. And it was really cool because we were looking for all these things that would help us connect all of Latin America among each other.
Yeah, one thing I must say that Steve Case really figured it out, what his vision was materialized during 20 years after he gave it. And I think this is another example that the pioneers get the arrows in their forehead. Let's talk about two things. One is what captures your imagination now and what you are passionate about. But before that, can you tell us how how you regard what's happening right now in Latin America with young people, with startups, with technology, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
absolutely. You know, Latin America is definitely my oyster. When I was working on my strategy paper for our group, part of that thesis was this is the time to return to Latin America and invest heavily. So we refocused not only our energy in terms of what industry we wanted to be in, making this big bet for digital, but we wanted to make that big bet for digital in Latin America. And you know, for me, it was very simple. This was already 6-7 years ago. We were looking at the data set, and there was a clear indication that the middle class was growing very, very rapidly. And there was also a clear indication that the middle class in Latin America was leapfrogging in terms of their access to technology and their expectations of how technology could better serve them. So that for me was the sweet spot, and that's what gave us sort of the courage to think that regardless of some countries being more unstable than the others, in the whole, the health of Latin America was a fantastic thing that we should try to capitalize on.
And how you are going to capitalize on?
Well,
what is the thing that you dream day and night about?
Yeah, so the first dream, which now lets me sleep, which is good, was building this ad network. And the ad network came from a very noble place. It actually came from us seeing, we used to own Univision, which was the leading TV network in Spanish in the United States. And there was only YouTube at the time, and our content was being uploaded to YouTube, not by us and not by Univision, by people. And the traffic it was generating was insane, and no one was monetizing that video traffic. Video traffic was being monetized in English language already, but we realized that there wasn't an agency out there that understood the value of the Hispanic and Spanish language population in terms of this traffic, although they did know what it was for TV. So we decided to build a network so that we can monetize all the traffic, not only in the US, but also in Latin America. And at the time, it wasn't even digital pennies. There was no money to be made in Latin America digitally, but we were growing at 800% a year. And we had the benefit of being able to set up the company both in the US and in Latin America, where the US operation, in a way, financed the Latin American operation. That's changed super quickly. In 4 years, the numbers that we're seeing now are impressive, and that's led us to be able to, we represent Facebook in every country where Facebook doesn't have an office. I am the Facebook office, and that's 9 markets at the moment. And they wouldn't have done that if they didn't think that there was a lot of money to be made there. So that's the old dream. The new dream.
Just a minute. In the old dream, let me ask a question. What is the size of the Hispanic market in the United States?
The size in terms of population?
In terms of population and in terms of purchasing power?
Oh, billions. It's the group that has the most purchasing power in the country. It's the most important minority, if you can still call it a minority. It depends. In Miami, we kind of think that we're the majority.
It's young people, and percentage-wise, the population is?
What's the unofficial data? They talk about 50 million, right? 57? Okay. And but what's more interesting, other than numbers and other than language, because that people want to know what's the language part. It doesn't matter. It's how you identify. But what's more interesting for us is that Hispanics have always over-indexed in their use of technology. So it's a really cool group to work with because they're the ones that are spending more time online or on their phone and doing more things transactionally. So it's a really fun data set to work with.
And so it's about 20% of the population and roughly same order of magnitude of purchasing power.
Yeah.
And you banked on it. And how do you see the advertising market growing in Latin America, the digital advertising market?
It's becoming very robust. I don't know if
you will promote it too much. P&G
is still in the room, but you have players like Procter and Gamble and that have always been at the forefront of innovating through advertising since the 50s, since television, and we were a part of that old conversation. And it's really cool to see a company like that, a huge company like that, that still understands that they have to keep innovating. And they're betting big on digital, which is incredible. So, part of the work that we do, when I say that we wanted to not only be the biggest but the smartest ad network, The smart part came from investing in companies that would allow us to help give better solutions to our clients. Not just in terms of AI and all the technical stuff, but also in terms of creating a product that was just so much more effective and that could tell a story so that you could make those accounts grow, right? And it's been great. It's been an amazing ride.
Now the content is produced in the United States or in Latin America or both? How you would...
The more, it's sort of this hybrid where I think what we bring to the table by literally having boots on the ground in every single country in Latin America is we do believe in a hyper-local strategy. For some clients, you can do something that will work in 2 or 3 countries. More and more, especially with digital, the expectation is that it's going to be hypersensitive and hyper-local. And we like being able to do that.
Do you want to say a word? You don't have to about Cuba and Venezuela?
I don't want to.
You don't want to? Okay.
We only have 12 minutes left. That's like a 5-hour conversation.
We have 9 minutes. Okay. So this was the old new things. And now what about the new things?
So the newest venture that we're working on.
Listen carefully because it will sound like science fiction, but apparently it's real.
So we've started a company that will be the first company in the world to provide direct-to-device satellite communication. And when I mean direct-to-device, it means a $30 phone made in China used in Africa. All of this will happen without the need of building any physical infrastructure whatsoever on the planet, or having to do anything to your phone so that it works. So it's totally frictionless.
So I can take in a bare mountain in Africa this device and call to the satellite, and I can talk with
You won't even know you're calling
with my
satellite.
mother.
You're just going to think that your phone coverage just got really good and really cheap.
Yeah.
You will actually not know that that's how it's being provided.
That's quite amazing. And can you tell us how you are going to do it, or it's?
Well, I'm going to tell everybody because no one's going to actually understand, and it does sound like science fiction. But in a way, what we're doing is that we're launching this. Imagine a set of stacked chairs, and we're launching them into space, into low orbit. And once they arrive in low orbit, they start self-assembling using magnetic forces into a structure that's bigger than a football field. That is basically on the underside a giant antenna, and on the overside it's the solar panel aspect of it. And they move really quickly.
And Adriana, whenever we speak about it, I see that your eyes are glowing, and it seems to me that it's not a business for you, but a passion. Am I right?
Yeah, I have been technically obsessed with satellites since I was a little girl, and people make fun of me for it because I want to talk about it all the time. And the obsession probably began when we were launching DirecTV, and we had to build our own satellite. And I was 13, and I was invited to go to Cape Canaveral to see the launching of the satellite. I don't know how many 13-year-olds get to do that. That's pretty cool. And we were really nervous that the satellite was never going to make it into orbit. So I remember that as being one of the most exciting and craziest things I've ever seen my dad do. From there, I obviously started learning a lot about nanosatellites because I felt like that was the first time that satellites were going to be accessible for anybody who wanted to do something with them. And I had some very incredible chance encounters. I was at MIT at the Space Lab, where there's this incredible Professor Lozano, Mexican professor who runs the program there, and 2 hours with him was worth, 3 years of reading material on how nanosatellites was going to disrupt the world. So this interest of mine, kept me sort of very much well informed, and it led me to the founder of this amazing company, this guy called Abel Avellan, who's actually Venezuelan and lives in Miami. So to Susan's point, if the idea is great, you can do it from anywhere. And we're raising a lot of money from Miami, so hopefully it will be considered a great Miami story.
When we will be able to make the first call?
In 2 years.
In 2 years?
Yeah.
That's a very tight schedule, I would say.
Yes.
Okay. And are you going to go on one of the satellite rides, or you stay on the ground?
No. Listen, these nanos are they're this big. I wouldn't be able to piggyback on any of that.
Yeah, they are nano, but still they are the size of...
Of a football field, correct. So the first thing that we're doing, which is really interesting, is so our main campus is going to be in Midland, Texas. Texas is a very good place to be in the space business. And we're actually soon, in January, we're inverting the problem. We're building the antennae, the football field antenna on Earth, and we're sending satellites to the orbit to start testing latency.
I see.
So I'll go to that.
Yeah, I couldn't understand how you are going to do a proof of concept. But
Yeah, that's how we're inverting it.
yeah, that's a smart idea. Tell us a little bit about the rise of startups and youngsters in Latin America as you see it.
Yeah, it's this new emerging middle class that want to be part of a bigger conversation, that we can label millennials that are being born with digital solutions on their hand. They really all do have a very different sense of agency, I believe, than people used to a couple of generations ago. And with that sense of agency comes this understanding that they can have more control over their lives, and they all aspire to be entrepreneurs or micro-entrepreneurs, or they're willing to give it a try. And I think that's a very different conversation. When I speak to the people of like my father's generation in Latin America, if you didn't have the means, you didn't dream of being able to be an entrepreneur in the way that they do now. And I think a lot of that has to do with role modeling. There's so many great Latin American entrepreneurial stories now that people can look up to and aspire to. And it also has to do with, reforms at the educational level where people are really promoting these new values and this new skill set.
Yeah, also, the availability of web services and SaaS, etc., are really lowered the barrier to entry.
Connectivity, I think, has been the one, if you had to choose one thing that has made the difference, is access to connectivity.
So what are the main hubs in Latin America now that you see?
It depends. I think for us, tech-wise, our two main campuses are in Bogota and in Buenos Aires in Argentina. There's a very logical explanation there. It has to do with universities churning out more engineers, basically. If I was going to do Colombia again, I set up that office 10 years ago. I would probably go to Medellin. I think what's happening in Medellin is fantastic.
It's amazing.
And it's amazing, and I think it'd be very easy to attract top talent from around the world to be part of the Medellin ecosystem.
Who is in the audience from Colombia? Raise your hand and scream. Try to scream a little bit. Don't be so quiet.
I think, I think Chile with the new president, they've been doing a lot of work already with, Startup Chile, and which at the beginning was really, they were the first ones to do that in Latin America. And with a new president and the things that we're hearing, I think Chile is finally going to become an exciting place to do technology business. And that's sort of stable. But there's countries that I like that have been a great surprise to me where I'm working in these past years, like Paraguay and Bolivia, where I frankly, I had never been, and now I'm there all the time. And I love being there because they're countries that most people would define as sort of frontier markets. No one's paying attention. Paraguay, every time there's a chart about the world, there's never any data on Paraguay and Bolivia. They're the countries that are never part of the chart. So literally no one is paying attention. And the level of sophistication that I've seen there from sort of the community of managers and technologists is fantastic. And that's very reassuring because there's definitely not just a focus on Mexico City and Sao Paulo. I think we're seeing 10 or 12 cities that are really, really moving forward and leapfrogging because of technology.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget, I think, also Sao Paulo and some other...
Yeah, well, those are givens, right?
Before we have to terminate this conversation, tell us just a little bit, what is your social vision about this new technology that you are developing, not only the business one?
Well, I mean, in everything that we do, we don't have separate corporate social responsibility reporting. Every business that we do is built with a social component. That's just in our DNA, and it's the way that we wake up and our heart beats both ways. And we are always focused on the greater good. And we can go over a lot of examples of the way that we use AOL and DirecTV to really even the playing field of access to education. And what we're doing now with our interactive business, we're actually in the middle of trying to figure out how we can use this ad network to help with the refugee crisis that we're having of Venezuelans all over Latin America. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but it's a combination of using messaging that we can work on from our media platform, using our ad network and our partnerships to be able to get the message out, and also use that to create community to help these immigrants that are arriving with nothing have a good start at either validating their education, legally doing their paperwork so that they can become decent members of society. That's really important. With a satellite business, the conversation is much broader. First of all, it's not a Latin American play, it's a global play. The huge story there is that we're going to bring connectivity to the world, period. No one will be left behind. And I'm trying to understand what that means, but I think the social implications are going to be enormous. To begin with, people are not going to have to be focused on going to cities to have substantial careers. They're going to be able to do that from their farm in a good way. So the implications are big. And you and I were talking, you had this great idea of reserving.
It was your idea.
Yossi had a very good idea, which I'm going to implement tomorrow, because whatever he says, I always do, which is to reserve a bit of the bandwidth in our new satellite business and keep it open sourced and put out a calling to the world for people that are interested to see what solutions, what applications they come up with that could be really an incredible part of having connectivity available basically for free in the world. And I love that.
I think with this note is a good place to finish the talk. Adriana, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and you are always very inspiring, and I think that as one of the main change agents for Latin America, the work you are doing and you will continue to do is very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yossi.